This is part 2, episode 46. Match start. As he shouted, everyone opened their eyes wide. Their pupils even shrank. Everyone's attention was drawn to the competition stage. On the city wall, the Star Luo Emperor and the White Tiger Duke didn't really converse either. Their palms were pressed on the crenellations, and they were watching the match anxiously. The White Tiger squinted his eyes, and they glowed with light. When he saw Hu Yuhao, he had a weird feeling. He couldn't tell what it was exactly, but Hu Yuhao naturally drew his attention. Could this young fellow create a miracle? Both parties unleashed their martial souls as the competition began. Meng Hongchen lifted her arms, and 2 streaks of icy blue light instantly appeared. Her armor was damaged, but her Class 6 swords were still intact. Her defense might have been weakened without the impregnable wall and armor, but her offensive ability wasn't much affected. Xiao Hongchen took in a deep breath behind Meng Hongchen, and repressed the pain in his body. He also unleashed his 3-legged golden toad. Golden, metal foam spilled out, and barrels started to appear on his body. Meng Hongchen had a sudden feeling that only such a dazzling martial soul was worthy of him. Wang Dong's figure started to rise as his wings flapped open. As they started to flap, he leapt in Meng Hongchen and Xiao Hongchen's direction. Hu Yuhao was tightly stuck to Wang Dong's back, and his hands were around his waist. The two of them seemed like the same person now. But Meng Hongchen and Xiao Hongchen couldn't see Hu Yuhao's arms around Wang Dong's waist, as Hu Yuhao's imitations started to take effect. Wang Dong's speed was naturally inferior to Ma Xiaotao's, but he was not slow. As he flapped his wings, he emitted a dazzling and blinding golden blue radiance, which enabled him to quicken his speed through the air. Hu Yuhao had also unleashed his soul tool thruster behind him. Although it was only a Class 2 thruster, it still allowed Wang Dong's speed to increase by at least 30%. Xiao Hongchen's attack began. Streaks of light shot out, and they started to engulf Wang Dong's body. Since he was a soul engineer, using a long-range soul tool to lock onto his target was very basic. Even though he was critically injured, he was confident that he could strike his opponent. Soul tool rays and soul tool cannon shells engulfed Wang Dong as if they were windstorms. There were even soul tools among them that could lock onto their opponents. However, the two of them fell into a slight trance just as they were about to attack. Xiao Hongchen's attack had already been unleashed, but its lock-on effect didn't work. What was going on? Xiao Hongchen was shocked. But he had unleashed several of his long-range soul tools at the same time. His all-round attack had already been launched. Xiao Hongchen believed that it would be very difficult for Hu Yuhao and Wang Dong to resist his wave of attacks with their abilities. He used Class 5 soul tools that even soul kings had to be careful of. Moreover, his attack was so condensed. Even if they used the Golden Road, what kind of effect could it produce? That martial fusion soul skill of theirs was a control-type skill, meaning that it was unlikely to strike both Xiao Hongchen and Meng Hongchen. Even if they were struck, nothing would happen. There was no way that Hu Yuhao and Wang Dong could get close to them. Xiao Hongchen and Meng Hongchen had the same thoughts. But their eyes soon opened wide. That was because they discovered that they were wrong. Against the attacks of Class 5 soul tools, one could dodge instead of resisting them. Wang Dong's wings retracted before he made a breathtaking escape. His pair of wings seemed to have a life of their own. They flapped open before retracting, flapping and drifting. Every transformation adjusted his flying posture slightly. The streaks of soul tool rays and soul tool cannon shells slid past him, because they couldn't lock onto him. Wang Dong was like a radiant butterfly goddess that was facing a huge web. No matter how all-engulfing that web was, he could find a loophole to escape. His glittery dodges even left streaks of dazzling shadows in mid-air. Bright, golden blue flowing light caused the spectators to erupt in cheers. Everyone sympathized with the underdogs. The spectators' emotions reached their height as they witnessed Wang Dong's impeccable dodges. They were even praying for Shrek Academy. It didn't matter whether they had wagered on the Sun Moon Imperial Soul Engineering Academy. As the saying goes, the insider knows the ropes, while the outsider just comes along for the ride. The spectators were extremely excited as they watched the competition, but the true Soul Masters were also wide-eyed right now. Including the Star Luo Emperor and White Tiger Duke, those who were observing carefully, or Soul Masters with great visual powers, could tell that Hu Yuhao's Soul Tool thruster had developed slight changes, as Wang Dong was dodging Xiao Hongchen's attack. This meant that his Soul Tool thruster had launched, but not with great intensity. But it was these gentle propulsions that enabled Wang Dong to dodge successfully time and time again. The cooperation between the two of them couldn't just be described using great chemistry. They were almost like the same person. However, they would vomit out blood if they knew what Hu Yuhao was thinking. Without a doubt, Xiao Hongchen had lost his ability to lock onto Wang Dong because of his spiritual interference. Wang Dong turned to his left at this instant and managed to slide in between the two streaks of light. But Meng Hongchen's attack wasn't so easily avoided. The light blades struck each other behind Wang Dong and unleashed a layer of icy fog. The vermilion ice toad's lethal poison had finally appeared in this critical last match of the tournament. Below the stage, Elder Xian, Wang Yang, He Kai-tu and Xiao Xiao were all extremely anxious. The key lay in whether Hu Yuhao and Wang Dong could resist this lethal poison. The icy fog covered a huge area. Wang Dong and Hu Yuhao were immediately engulfed, but Wang Dong didn't seem to realize the lethal poison that was coming from his back. His wings revealed a golden light pattern before his second soul ring flashed brightly. A huge number of golden balls of light suddenly appeared. They started to bombard Xiao Hongchen, who had also just unleashed his second wave of attacks. The radiant butterfly goddess' second soul skill, the light of the butterfly goddess. An intense aura of light filled the entire venue. This was everyone's first time seeing the might of Wang Dong's soul skill. With Hu Yuhao's imitation covering them, the soul rings that both Hu Yuhao and Wang Dong unleashed were white. No one could see exactly what class their soul skills were in. But the power of their soul skills wouldn't change because of this. Wang Dong quickly told Xiao Hongchen, with his abilities, that underestimating him was a big mistake. An explosive boom reverberated within a 20-meter radius. Logically speaking, Wang Dong's light of the butterfly goddess shouldn't have been able to resist the soul tool rays even if they could resist the soul tool cannons. But Xiao Hongchen's attack was perfectly intercepted. The explosion only occurred between the two of them. A few of the balls formed by Wang Dong's light of the butterfly goddess landed even in front of Xiao Hongchen, and forced him to resist using his impregnable wall. Only a soul ancestor's strongest soul skill would have such an effect. Xiao Hongchen cursed in his heart. His cultivation was indeed not up to standard yet, such that the power of his soul tools couldn't be fully unleashed. He was suppressed by Wang Dong's second soul skill, and felt extremely depressed by that. Wang Dong had 3 rings. With the aid of Hu Yuhao's twin martial soul that was close to a 3-ringed cultivation, the combination of their soul powers reached above rank 40. Hu Yuhao's soul power might only be at rank 28, but the sum of his soul power was not any less than Wang Dong. That was because his second martial soul might have a soul ring. Although most of the power of the 100,000-year soul ring was sealed, his total soul power still managed to increase some. The Haodong power didn't function based on the laws of addition. Wang Dong's light of the butterfly goddess was also a 1,000-year soul skill. Under such a circumstance, their combined strike was already comparable to a top-ranked soul ancestor. They were as powerful as Bei Bei and Shu Sansha with their unchanged martial souls, and that was without consideration for their martial fusion soul skills. Meng Hongchen was slightly shocked as she saw Wang Dong showing his might. She quickly adjusted her mentality and burst forward rapidly. Her thin swords turned into a sky full of light projections that slashed down towards Wang Dong. It was a pity that her armor was damaged, otherwise she would have flown into the air to fight Wang Dong. Meng Hongchen had a question in her mind right now. Why hadn't the vermilion ice toad's poison taken effect yet? The vermilion ice toad's poison did engulf Hu Yuhao and Wang Dong. But it was a pity that her poison was useless against them. Why was this? Only Hu Yuhao understood why. This could only be traced back to the time when Hu Yuhao caught hold of Bei Bei after he was defeated by the ice toad's poison. Oh. How could this be? Such a soul beast still exists. Ice Empress, what's going on? What's wrong with my eldest senior? Then what do we do? Ice Empress, can you neutralize this poison? I can't. That's because your partner cannot bear the ultimate ice's encroachment. He can only dispel the poison through the extreme chill in his own body. There's no other way. If that method is used, only an ice-type body can handle the burden. Otherwise, one's internal organs will be frozen. Will I be poisoned? Are you joking? As one of the 3 heavenly kings of the extreme north, I am the king of all ice-type soul beasts. Although the vermilion ice toad is a rather strong soul beast, there's a reason why it doesn't dare to enter the extreme north region. That's because the ice jade scorpions are its jinx. While we gave up lethal poison to achieve the ultimate ice, we can't be hurt by any ice-type poison. You don't have to be afraid of her poison when you face her. No ice-type or fire-type poison can work against the ultimate ice. If Hu Yuhao had to appraise which soul skill of his was the most powerful, it had to be one of the 4 soul skills that the Ice Empress conferred onto him. In terms of both offense and defense, the Ice Empress lived up to its name as one of the 3 heavenly kings of the extreme north. But if he had to choose the most practical soul skill, which one would he choose? If someone really understood his capabilities, he might think it was the spiritual detection. But Hu Yuhao would certainly choose the Spirit Eye's second soul skill. Imitation was a 1,000-year soul skill bestowed onto him by the clan members that the Skydream Iceworm helped him to find. Among all of Hu Yuhao's soul skills, imitation was the least offensively inclined. But it was the most important soul skill to him, even far more important than his spiritual detection. Although imitation was a 1,000-year soul skill, it depleted Hu Yuhao's soul power the least when it was unleashed due to its special characteristic. Hu Yuhao could sustain it for a very long time, and he wouldn't even be discovered by his opponent, unless his opponent's spiritual power was beyond his, and they could use a special spiritual detection power to see through him. The only pity was that imitation could only be used within a 3-meter radius with Hu Yuhao as the center. Otherwise, this soul skill would have been unbelievably powerful. Hu Yuhao was using imitation at this exact moment. Not only did his imitation prevent his opponent from seeing him, but it also prevented his opponent from seeing what he was doing. Even the spectators couldn't see. When imitation was used, Hu Yuhao and Wang Dong were actually masked by a layer of transparent armor that seemed to be made up of diamond-like particles. Their entire bodies were covered. It was the Ice Empress Barrier, Hu Yuhao's strongest defense-type soul skill. It was one of the 2 soul skills bestowed onto him by the 400,000-year Ice Jade Empress Scorpion's soul ring. The ultimate ice's defensive strength reached its peak under the Ice Empress Barrier. How could the vermilion ice toad's poison overcome it? A dim radiance flashed. Hu Yuhao and Wang Dong seemed to be the same entity now. In fact, Hu Yuhao depleted more of his soul power than Wang Dong, who was attacking more actively. Spiritual detection sharing, spiritual interference, and the Ice Empress Barrier. These soul skills were unleashed with all of Hu Yuhao's might. This was a soul skill that Wang Dong used very, very rarely. However, its strength was absolutely not as ordinary as that of a normal 1,000-year soul skill. Wang Dong's second soul ring was already a 1,000-year one, and his third one had actually surpassed 3,000 years of age. In other words, his third soul skill was practically equivalent to Meng Hongchen's fourth one. Although his attack couldn't take on a Soul King, the explosive power generated by the butterfly goddess slash that was strengthened by the Haodong power was extremely great. It clearly wasn't possible for him to use this soul skill to defeat Meng Hongchen, but it was enough for him to merely stall for time. The waves of light blades instantaneously detonated, making the hundreds of golden light blades resemble the bloom of a rose bud. Then, it once again exploded into countless flower petals. The instant the tightly packed blades of light detonated, they carried the aura of the sun and flew around in all directions. Meng Hongchen was flustered as she faced Wang Dong's attack. After all, she had lost her powerful defensive armor, which meant that she would be injured if the blades of light struck her. If she were in her peak condition and fully equipped with her soul tools, she would have even dared to charge through an attack like this without feeling any pressure. However, this was clearly impossible now. This was the final battle, and victory in this match would determine whether or not they would be able to bring the champion's trophy back. How could she dare to be careless at all? Furthermore, she subconsciously felt that Wang Dong was very strong. Perhaps these were her inner feelings wreaking havoc on her, or just the feelings of a young girl. Because of that, Meng Hongchen instantly danced about with her swords the instant she collided with the butterfly goddess slash, creating an airtight barrier that blocked all of Wang Dong's attacks. Whenever her thin swords collided with a blade of light, they would release a large amount of the vermilion clear ice toad's poison. As long as her poison took effect, this battle would be over. Meng Hongchen and Xiao Hongchen had watched over Hu Yuhao's previous matches, but their line of sight had been blocked by the protective barrier surrounding the tournament stage. As such, they were only able to see Hu Yuhao's 100,000-year soul ring and the imposing aura that it gave off. They hadn't sensed its true aura. The facts had shown that what Hu Yuhao had done was merely an illusion. After that battle, Hu Yuhao hadn't used an ability like that in any of his other battles. Although the other teams wouldn't go so far as to completely ignore his soul skill, a large majority of them reckoned that he had been seen through, which meant that there was no longer any practical meaning to it anymore. However, as Meng Hongchen faced the aura that belonged to the Ice Jade Emperor Scorpion, she immediately realized how much of a joke her judgment had been. The terrifying aura of the Ice Jade Emperor Scorpion was just so realistic, and even if they were trapped in an illusory domain, this was one that was infinitely close to reality. Her martial soul was fully suppressed in front of this terrifying aura, to the extent where she wasn't even able to release a half of her true cultivation. This was even compounded with the sensation of terror that came from the very depths of her heart, causing a tremendous impact to her will to fight. It was no wonder that so many people had suffered disastrous defeats when facing the 100,000-year soul ring that Hu Yuhao had released. The deterrence it gave off was just that powerful. Meng Hongchen wasn't the only person affected by the Ice Jade Emperor Scorpion's aura. Even Xiao Hongchen was similarly affected by it. The vermilion clear ice toad and the three-legged golden toad were both toad-type martial souls. Out of the 5 poisons, the poison that came from a toad and the poison that came from a scorpion were equally matched. There wasn't too much of a difference between both parties, and thus victory and defeat would be decided by the levels of the two creatures. There was no doubt that the three-legged golden toad was of a higher level than the vermilion clear ice toad, and the two were also top-ranked martial souls. However, they were akin to subjects who were facing their king whilst facing the unrivaled martial soul, the Ice Jade Empress Scorpion. Regardless of how strong they were still petty and weak in front of a true king. They were completely unable to imagine how a mere illusory domain could cause such a great effect. However, was what Hu Yuhao was releasing now still a mere illusory domain? This was a true display of the power of ultimate ice, and also its tyrannical might. Even the vermilion clear ice toad, that was also an ice-type martial soul, wasn't able to endure it. Although Hu Yuhao couldn't truly use the might of this domain-type soul skill, he was still able to unleash a portion of the Ice Empress power in a limited range. Meng Hongchen reached the top point of her jump as her body was instantly frozen in the domain of perpetual ice, causing her to immediately plummet to the ground. How could Wang Dong just give up on a good opportunity like this? Folding his wings, he instantly chased after Meng Hongchen and activated his guillotine wing. However, Hu Yuhao and Wang Dong didn't notice that a dark red chain had somehow been connected to Meng Hongchen's waist. The instant Wang Dong's attack was about to land, Meng Hongchen was instantly pulled away, bringing her out of Wang Dong's attack range. Right after that, a large energy storm flew straight towards him, blocking his pursuit. The dark red chain had appeared in Xiao Hongchen's hand first, and his current expression was that of solemnity. Right? As they walked onto the tournament stage, neither he or Meng Hongchen had thought that this battle had any meaning. However, he now felt that he had been wrong. As he faced these two youths, he realized that he couldn't use their level of soul power to judge them. Wang Dong and Hu Yuhao were extremely well coordinated, but Xiao Hongchen and Meng Hongchen were siblings. The two had grown up together, and had worked, fought, and cultivated together. The level of synergy they possessed wasn't any inferior to Hu Yuhao's duo. At this moment, a dark red light lit up by Meng Hongchen's chest. Right after that, an icy mist shot out from her body with a flash of red light. Then, it quickly returned and entered her body once again, allowing her to unexpectedly recover from the domain of perpetual ice. Although her body was still trembling, and she didn't seem to be able to hold her swords properly, she had regained the ability to move. Hu Yuhao had used the domain of perpetual ice many times in the past, and he had even used it against Soul Kings before. However, this was the first time he met someone who was able to bypass it so quickly. Other than the difference in their cultivations, the profundity contained within the vermilion clear ice toad's fusion of ice and fire had played an important role in this. Hu Yuhao was quickly thinking to himself, it's no wonder the vermilion clear ice toad didn't get decisively sealed in front of my ultimate ice. If I were also a Soul King, how would she be able to break through my domain of perpetual ice so easily? At this moment, both parties seemed to return to their original positions. Under Xiao Hongchen's all-out attacks, Hu Yuhao and Wang Dong weren't able to complete their pursuit. The might of the Ice Jade Emperor Scorpion then vanished like a flash in the dark. Unfurling his wings, Wang Dong once again revealed his powerful evasion skills in midair. Guided by the spiritual detection, over 90% of the Soul Tool attacks targeting him would miss completely. However, Wang Dong's figure was gradually approaching the Hongchen siblings. When two Soul Kings used a fusion skill together, how powerful would their attack be? They were clearly trying to take Hu Yuhao's duo out in one shot. Let's take them on. Wang Dong let out a shout. Because he was overly excited, there seemed to be a few traces of delicateness contained in his voice. Hu Yuhao took a deep breath. He could no longer hesitate at this moment. Otherwise, their last chance of winning would disappear. Immediately dispelling the Ice Empress armor, Hu Yuhao hugged Wang Dong. At the same time, the aura of the Ice Jade Empress Scorpion returned to his body, leaving only his spirit eyes. Wang Dong's wings quietly vanished, causing the dazzling bluish-golden light in the sky to disappear. Wang Dong hugged Hu Yuhao from the back, then descended to the tournament stage. At this moment, however, a pitch-black hammer appeared in his hand. This was his second martial soul, the Clear Sky Hammer. They were about to fall to the ground, but at this moment, Hu Yuhao and Wang Dong's bodies released a dazzling light. This was an indescribable light of nothingness that caused everything contained within it to vanish from sight. The only thing left was an illusory figure. This illusory figure looked somewhat strange, and its entire body was transparent. Its face couldn't be clearly seen, but its hands formed the shape of a heart. The figure looked like an adult male, and if anyone had seen the initial display of Hu Yuhao and Wang Dong's Heavenly Emperor's hammer, they would have discovered that this void-like figure was identical to that of the aforementioned skill. However, the Heavenly Emperor's hammer was formed by the fusion between the Ice Jade Empress Scorpion and the Clear Sky Hammer. On the other hand, Hu Yuhao and Wang Dong weren't using the golden road that was formed by the Radiant Butterfly Goddess and the Spirit Eyes, nor the Heavenly Emperor's hammer. Instead, they were using the mysterious fusion between the Spirit Eyes and the Clear Sky Hammer. Everything passed by quickly as both parties unexpectedly released their respective fusion skills together. This was the first time that this had happened in this year's Continental Advanced Academy Soul Dueling Tournament. The audience felt as though their hearts were about to jump out from their throats. A scene like this would be rarely seen even in 100 years. How many soul masters in this world could possess a fusion skill? The fact that two pairs of them had appeared at this moment was simply too shocking. Even Elder Xian from Shrek Academy was already clenching his fists tightly. Were it not for the fact that he was distracted by suppressing the black flames of the Dark Phoenix, he would have had an even more excited expression. It was at this moment that the audience finally took notice of them. There was no need to even mention how much of a miserable state the two siblings were in. Disregarding Xiao Hongchen, even Meng Honchen's mouth and nose were covered in blood stains. They seemed to have come to their senses at this moment, but they couldn't do anything other than reveal the shock in their eyes. Xiao Hongchen suddenly let out a muffled groan, and he directly fell to the floor. However, his eyes were actually filled with infatuation the moment before he collapsed. However, Meng Honchen's eyes were only filled with shock. She couldn't believe that the city-overthrowing beauty that made even her look inferior was created by a fusion skill. The peerless beauty descended from the sky and swiftly landed in front of the duo, a chilly intent radiating from her golden eyes as she did so. At this moment, Meng Hongchen was finally able to clearly see the characters on the peerless beauty's forehead. This character was clearly a trident, and it was very small, seemingly only an inch wide. Moreover, it quietly faded as the peerless beauty landed. However, it left behind a noble sense of awe on her forehead, though it had only existed for a brief moment. Goodbye. The young lady's red lips rose gently. With a gentle sweep of her wings, a three-colored halo of light immediately covered Xiao Hongchen and Meng Hongchen's bodies. However, it didn't seem to hurt them, it only sent their bodies off the tournament stage. Meng Hongchen didn't try to resist it. Due to Xiao Hongchen's heavy injuries, Hongchen's yearning had been unleashed using her own soul power only. Furthermore, after it was forcefully interrupted by Hu Yuhao and Wang Dong's spiritual storm, they were struck with a heavy backlash. At this moment, they truly didn't possess any fighting strength at all. The tricolored butterfly wings vanished, and the peerless beauty moved towards the very center of the tournament stage with a flash. A layer of frost formed wherever she passed. Elder Xian was no calmer than Wang Yang. Every single wrinkle on his aged face seemed to be filled with vitality as he said, just how did they do it? Was what they just used a fusion skill? Right. Wang Yang said excitedly. I was the only person who they told about that last fusion skill. If I'm not mistaken, Hu Yuhao said that fusion skill was produced when his Ice Jade Scorpion fused with Wang Dong's Radiant Butterfly Goddess. It is called the Solitary Dance Amidst Frost, Raiment of Light. I didn't think that a fusion skill would be this beautiful. This is also the only fusion skill they possess, which is controlled by Wang Dong. We've won. The peerless beauty landed right in front of the heaven fiend Doluo. However, this great referee still had a dazed look in his eyes as he looked at this young lady, whose age seemed to be in the double digits. His voice was clearly somewhat hoarse as he said, "Yes, you've won." After speaking, Huang Heyun seemed to slip slightly. He was only able to regain his footing after stabilizing himself. Spiritual Storm wasn't just a pure spiritual type attack, but an attack that could directly go through an opponent's spiritual sea to unceasingly attack their spirit by using various memories. It didn't do something as simple as destroying a target spirit, but affected their consciousness. Although Huang Heyun was a titled Doluo, he had endured far too many things in his life. He had watched his close relatives and friends die one by one, and he had buried that pain deep in his heart. As he didn't make any preparations to block Hu Yuhao and Wang Dong's spiritual storm, Huang Heyun was affected much more than Xiao Hongchen and Meng Hongchen. The tricolored light vanished, and the peerless beauty once again turned into a bright, colorful halo. The halo of light quietly dissipated, revealing the two figures who were hugging each other. They were extremely pale, and they were both supporting and nestling up against each other as they quietly stood there. The tattoo of the Ice Jade Emperor Scorpion on Hu Yuhao's back slowly faded away. However, Wang Dong had already fallen into a deep sleep against his chest. Only the golden trident on his forehead flickered quietly for a bit. However, Hu Yuhao wasn't able to see all this. Although he was barely able to stand up while supporting Wang Dong, overexhausting his body had caused him to gradually lose all 6 of his senses. He only felt a patch of darkness around him, but he didn't feel any regret. At this moment, he only felt excitement and happiness. His last memory was that of him tightly hugging Wang Dong, while standing on the tournament stage of the finals of the Continental Advanced Academy Soul Dueling Tournament with his back straight. The Star Luo Emperor, Xu Jiawei, had a somewhat flushed expression as well, as he was also extremely excited. The image of that empire overthrowing beauty had been embedded in the depths of his heart as well. The White Tiger Duke was much calmer than him. He began to mutter to himself as he looked at the pair of youths who were embracing each other, a willpower as tough as steel. They'll definitely become very useful in the future. The entire plaza had already turned into a sea of boiling emotions. Due to the heavy injuries suffered by both participating teams, the awards ceremony had to be delayed. The Daotai Doluo, Elder Xian, had already appeared by the Sun Moon Imperial Soul Engineering Academy, blocking their path forward. "None of you are allowed to leave. Dispel the poison inflicted on my disciples first." Elder Xian had a very cold and solemn gaze in his eyes, and he still held Ma Xiaodao, who was flickering with the flames of the Dark Phoenix, in his embrace. The teacher in charge of the Sun Moon Imperial Soul Engineering Academy was still somewhat confused about the entire matter. Since everything had happened so quickly, he didn't know just how they had lost the final match that they were originally guaranteed to win. The instant he saw that peerless beauty take the stage, Xiao Hongchen and Meng Hongchen were sent down from the stage. Why had Wang Dong and Hu Yuhao not hurt Meng Hongchen? This was because they wanted her to dispel the poison in their teammates' bodies. Did you not hear what I just said? As he speaking, Elder Xian made a grabbing motion towards Meng Hongchen. Wait a moment. The teacher in charge of the Sun Moon Imperial Soul Engineering Academy was still somewhat confused about the entire matter. Since everything had happened so quickly, he didn't know just how they had lost the final match that they were originally guaranteed to win. The instant he saw that peerless beauty take the stage, Xiao Hongchen and Meng Hongchen were sent down from the stage. Why had Wang Dong and Hu Yuhao not hurt Meng Hongchen? This was because they wanted her to dispel the poison in their teammates' bodies. Did you not hear what I just said? As he speaking, Elder Xian made a grabbing motion towards Meng Hongchen. Wait a moment. The teacher in charge hurriedly blocked the path to Meng Hongchen. If possible, he truly wanted to resist Elder Xian. He truly didn't wish to allow the absolutely astonishing members of Shrek Academy to continue living. The higher the hopes one had toward a certain thing, the larger the disappointment would be if one failed to achieve it. The pain he currently felt was similar to that of falling down from a tall mountain. He had to stay strong as the teacher in charge of his team, but he couldn't. He truly didn't dare to obstruct Elder Xian at this moment. Xiao Hongchen was now unconscious, while Meng Hongchen had suffered heavy injuries. If he couldn't bring them back, he wouldn't face a consequence as simple as losing his own life. Even his family would be implicated in this matter. Elder Xian, this is only a competition. I'll dispel the poison in your students' bodies. The teacher in charge forcefully suppressed the grief he felt in his heart and enunciated each word carefully. Elder Xian nodded and said coldly, "That'd be for the best. Also, give me that sword that Ma Rulong used earlier." The teacher's expression immediately changed. "That won't be possible. That's a Class 8 soul tool that our Sun Moon Empire's illustrious Virtue Hall forged. Its value is inestimable. Let me ask you this. Are you going to give it, or not?" Elder Xian's voice was as cold and tough as ever, and he didn't release any pressure either. However, his mere question caused the teacher to start sweating to the point where his shirt was drenched. Elder Xian didn't look at him, but the unconscious Xiao Hongchen. The teacher's voice trembled somewhat as he said, "Elder Xian, you are but a transcendent Doluo. Don't tell me that you are going to bully the weak, and make things difficult for us of the younger generation." However, Hu Yuhao didn't know about any of this. By the time he woke up from his coma, it was already the afternoon of the day after. How uncomfortable. Coughing, Hu Yuhao gradually woke up from his deep sleep, his eyes still somewhat dazed. He only felt his entire body go soft, as though all of his energy had been sucked away. Not only that, but all of his muscles were in an extremely sore state. Even after sleeping for so long, he didn't seem to have any signs of recovering his soul power. This feeling of having everything sucked out from my body is really uncomfortable. Hu Yuhao wasn't feeling anxious at all. As his consciousness gradually recovered, he discovered that although he had severely overexhausted his body, he felt extraordinarily clear-headed after waking up. The memories of everything that had just occurred were clearly returning to him after he woke up, and he quickly remembered him and Wang Dong defeating their opponents in the finals. "We should have won. We're the final champions. We've protected Shrek Academy's glory." His excitement caused his eyes to gradually light up. The current Hu Yuhao had just noticed that something had changed in his spiritual sea. As he gazed deep into himself, he was immediately overjoyed. His spiritual sea had increased in size by 25% at the very least. Not only that, but his spiritual power had become more condensed, and even the golden lights in his spiritual sea had brightened somewhat. At this exact moment, a figure suddenly appeared in Hu Yuhao's mind. It had a head of pinkish-blue long hair, a set of golden eyes, and peerless looks, as well as a faintly discernible golden trident. Was she really the descent of the radiant goddess? This video will end here. Thank you for watching.